playing. If it's not, someone can just yell at me. Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me? Maybe? Okay, cool. Good morning. We're excited to have you here and to be able to talk with you guys face to face. It's nice to be back and actually able to talk with you guys, so we're excited. But announcements real quick, please follow us on social media because we love to talk to you guys and love to keep you guys updated. So give us a follow. And then join us next week. We'll be back on YouTube with a live stream, and it'll be Chaplain David giving us a sermon. And as always, scan in. Do we have a scan? If not, it's on your email. So go look at your email and scan in, and then you might get a really cool email from me. And then, as always, per requests, email or text to chapelonu@gmail.com during service or anytime throughout the week. Have a great time, guys.
All right. Good morning, everybody. It is good to see some bright, shining faces as we do this special chapel experience today. This is part of our series called Our Hearts Are Restless. And so the first week we talked about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And how his heart was restless for justice. The second week we talked about St. Augustine of Hippo and how his heart was restless for holiness. Last week we talked about Mother Teresa and how her heart was restless for compassion. So today we thought we would have an interfaith discussion and talk about how people of many different faiths have a restlessness for peace and how we can be peacemakers regardless of what our faith tradition or our perspective on the world or our philosophy happens to be. So I'm excited for this conversation. We've not done this specific kind of conversation before during chapel hour, and so we're excited to be able to offer this. And we will have opportunity for those who are on the Zoom call to be a part of the conversation. Also, if you're on the Zoom call, you will be getting links throughout the time that we're together with a link to the readings that we're going to be talking about. And so you'll be able to do those. And I'll hop over to YouTube and put those links up as we're talking about those as well. So thank you all very much. And I'll turn it over to Cameron.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, thank you, David. So we're gonna go ahead and get started here. So before I've selected some readings from the Quran, the New Testament, and the Hebrew Bible. I'm gonna go through those, and then while I'm reading those, I'm gonna ask you guys to think about some questions. I'm gonna read them to you now. How would you define peace? What are some simple things or actions that you can do towards peace? And how do we keep peace between others who are different from us in our own beliefs? And while I read this, I want you guys, if you want to take notes or just keep those questions in your head, and then after I finish the readings, we're going to have an open conversation that anyone is open to add into and whenever they like. Alrighty, so starting from the Quran, if two groups of believers fight, you believers should try to reconcile them. If one of them is clearly oppressing the other, fight the oppressors until they submit to God's command. Then make a just and even-handed reconciliation between the two of them. God loves those who are even-handed. The believers are brothers, so make peace between your two brothers and be mindful of God so that you may be given mercy. Believers, no one group of men should jeer at another, who may after all be better than them. No one group of women should jeer at another, who may after all be better than them. Do not speak ill of one another. Do not use offensive nicknames for one another. How bad is it to be called a mischief maker after accepting faith? Those who do not repent of their behavior are evildoers. Believers, avoid making too many assumptions. Some assumptions are sinful, and do not spy on one another or speak ill of people behind their backs. Would any of you like to eat the flesh of your dead brother? No, you would hate it. So be mindful of God. God is ever relenting, most merciful. People, we created you all from a single man and a single woman, and made you into races and tribes so that you should recognize each other. In God's eyes, the most honored of you are the ones most mindful of him. God is all-knowing, all-aware. Next, from the New Testament. But I say to you that listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love your enemies, do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. And our last one from the Hebrew Bible. Sheba had passed through all the tribes of Israel up to Abel of Beth-Mecca, and all the Berites assembled and followed him inside. Joab's men came and besieged him in Abel of Beth-Mecca, and threw up a siege mound against the city, and it stood against the rampart. All the troops of Joab were engaged in battering the wall, when a clever woman shouted from the city, "Listen, listen, tell Joab to come over here so I can talk to him." He approached her, and the woman asked, "Are you Joab?" "Yes," he answered. And she said to him, "Listen to what your handmaid has to say." "I'm listening," he replied. And she continued, "In olden times, people used to say, 'Let them inquire of Abel,' and that was the end of the matter. I am one of those who seek the welfare of the faithful in Israel, but you seek to bring death upon a mother city in Israel. Why should you destroy the Lord's possession?" Joab replied, far be it from me to destroy or to ruin, not at all, but a certain man from the hill country of Ephraim, named Sheba son of Bechri, has rebelled against kind David. Just hand him alone over to us, and I will withdraw from the city." The woman assured Joab, "His head shall be thrown over the wall to you." The woman came to all the people with her clever plan, and they cut off the head of Sheba son of Bechri and threw it down to Joab. He then sounded the horn, and all the men dispersed to their homes, and Joab returned to the king in Jerusalem. So to start off, to bring back our questions, does anyone have any thoughts or comments on the readings to start off? We're having trouble hearing you. You're a little quiet. It sounds like, is your laptop sitting on something that might like muffle the speakers? That was a little better that time.
My thought, what you read from the Quran is actually called Surah Al-Baqarah. I'm not sure what chapter, but the chapter is called the cow. The cow, that's literally what it's called, translation. And God, I believe that if we all believe in God, God is love. Like, you can't contradict love. There's no violence in any religion. In the Quran, I think my biggest problem is with translation. When it comes to reading, like the Bible, for example, in which I read in Arabic and English, like I have a translation.
Okay.
But when it comes to the Quran, which is my holy book, I can only read it in Arabic because I feel like the English translation is way off in many ways. I would define peace as the absence of evil, unity, being able to get along. I love to learn about religion, and you guys ever heard of Karen Armstrong? She writes a lot on comparative religion, and one of my favorite things that she wrote is, compassion is particularly a difficult virtue. Not surprisingly, it demands that we go beyond the limitations of our egotism and insecurity and inherited prejudice. Not surprisingly, there have been times when all three of the God religions have failed to achieve these high standards. Jews and Christians and Muslims who punctuously attend divine services, yet denigrate people who belong to different ethnic and ideological camps, deny one of the basic truths of their religion. It is equally inappropriate for people who call themselves Jews, Christians, and Muslims to condone an inequitable social system. She writes a lot of good books on comparative religion. And in terms of getting along with other religions.
So we're actually gonna do one question at a time.
Sorry, I get too excited with this.
No, I'm glad that you're really excited about it. We just to keep track a little bit of the conversation. We're gonna do one at a time. So we're gonna stick with any input that anyone has on the readings, as well as how would you define peace.
Okay.
We'll circle back to you though. So.
Yeah, of course.
So I think I really liked getting to hear the excerpts from each different book, and I also get what you're saying about translations not necessarily being the best. We were actually talking about that in one of my music classes the other day. So I wish that I knew more than just English and a little bit of French, because it's nice to have the meaning of those words in its truest form. But as far as how I would define peace. I answered these questions prior as well, and it was cool to like kind of compare what I had thought to what I was hearing in the reading. And I wrote that it's an agreement to be civil in order to create an environment free of disturbance. And I think that an environment free of disturbance, not everybody is going to like agree upon that or what that looks like. And so when you see wrong, I think it's important to step in to break up that disturbance and try to get rid of it in a way that still is like loving and kind and caring, because even when people are creating disturbances of some sort, they still, like every religion, like you were talking about, still has like love and compassion is one of its like biggest rules. That's something that we often as religious people and people in general don't necessarily follow through on in every case. So I definitely think that keeping that in mind as like the top thing, and I also think of like the fruits of the spirit in Galatians, and the first one that's listed is love. And so that's definitely like, I think, a very important thing to bear in mind as you're kind of trying to create that peaceful environment.
Do we have any other thoughts from anyone else on this question, or are we ready to move on? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go on to our next question of what are some simple things or actions that you can do towards peace? So just everyday life things that you don't have to go extremely out of your way for, but something that you can do to kind of encourage peace in your everyday life.
Or just as Prophet Muhammad says, kindness, even just being kind, is an act of charity. I live by the laws of karma. I believe that everything you do is going to come back to you in one way or another, no matter what. So being kind on a daily basis, treating people with respect, respecting your parents is one for me. Like, my mom makes me mad in so many ways, but she's my mom. So like in the Quran, and also I have not read the whole Torah, but also in the Bible, it does speak about like respecting your parents, and just being compassionate in the way that you can, and forgiving people, not holding grudges, not retaliating.
Awesome. Those are all really good ones. Thank you. Does anyone else have any? That can even be as simple as paying for the person behind you when you get coffee in the morning.
It's funny you said that, because I actually had that in my notes from last night. So I also think this is a little bit of like a bigger thing, but it's something that I've been able to make permanent positive change on campus, at least in my time here on Student Senate, advocating for minority and marginalized groups, and trying to level that playing field for them and give them kind of the same as much as we can, you know, because there are a lot of like oppressed groups and a lot of wrongs, and like I was saying earlier, like stepping in and being able to kind of mediate that is really important. And I also think sharing love and kindness and care without the expectation of receiving anything in return. And that was something that stood out to me in one of the readings from earlier. So with somebody that you may never see again, you know, like somebody who was not kind to you, being kind to them, you don't expect them to necessarily be kind back, you know? So I think removing expectation to get something in return is also a big piece of it.
What you said about not receiving anything in return, that's like my life motto. That's like my favorite quote. It's also a quote by Imam Hussein, which is an imam of mine, where the most merciful or most compassionate of people are the ones who do good without no expectation of anything in return. And I know that it's also by Saint Asi. So I've heard that in so many different religions. So I agree with you 100%.
Alrighty. David, I saw your mic off. Did you have anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to lift up Michael mentioned the text, the Christian text, and there's something unique about that text that I feel like I just want to point out, just because I think it goes a lot deeper than the typical understanding of what people see when they read that text. So Jesus says there, if somebody strikes you on the cheek, turn the other cheek to them also. And sometimes people see that as a sign of like a weak peace, like we just let people roll over us and that's peace. But actually, it's a very powerful statement, because what Jesus is saying there is, if somebody strikes you, in the culture in which Jesus lived, you would only hit somebody with your right hand, because your left hand was the dirty hand. And this is true in a lot of cultures, even still today, that you don't use the left hand for a lot of good things, like eating and all those kinds of things happen with the right hand. So if somebody hits you with the right hand, it's going to strike you across your cheek. And when Jesus says turn the other cheek, what he's doing is he's forcing that person to slap you with their bad hand. And in a sense, it's going to make that person pause before they do violence to think, what am I doing? What am I doing here? And I think, for me at least, part of peacemaking is helping people to recognize the illogic of violence and the illogic of doing harm to other people. And so I know we're going to talk about nonviolence in a bit here, and that this text also speaks to nonviolence, I think. But I think that those two things kind of go hand in hand, and that it also speaks to the justice aspect of peace, that the way that peace can remain, I think, is if there is a sense of justice, if right is being done, and people who are doing things that are harmful to others are having that called out and are making amends for that.
Thank you. Alrighty, does anyone else have anything? All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to our last question for peacemaking. And that one is, how do we keep peace between others who are different from us and our own beliefs?
For sure, it's being non-judgmental. One of God's names is the judge. His job, his role is to judge us. So, not judging people. We are all different in so many ways. I think it's our job to embrace those differences, not judge each other, and not try to do God's job.
Definitely. Yeah, I think a big part of that is being open-minded and remembering that we come into contact with people every day that are different from us in many different ways. And we just have to try to keep that in mind, sometimes more often than I know all of us do, just out of habit. But keeping that in mind when we have conversations with people that we aren't super familiar with.
And sorry, Michael, you can go ahead. So one of the things that I think of really is just knowing when to walk away also, because I'm a big person who is very open and loves to hear other people's opinions and their beliefs. But I tend to shut down as soon as it becomes hateful, because I feel, again, it goes into the judgmental aspect, that it's not our job to be judgmental or hateful. And so knowing when to walk away from that, and that it is okay, and that's not you being closed-minded or shutting down. It's you understanding that, again, it's not our position to be a judgmental person or to be hateful towards others. And that some of the things that people, view as like, that want to try and start arguments, that it is okay to walk away. So I think that's one of the big things that I use to remind myself on how to keep peace between others, is like being able to have that open conversation, but also being able to acknowledge and maybe even explain yourself, like if you don't want to continue the discussion and why you wouldn't want to, because again, like a person is being judgmental, hateful, rude, things like that. So just being open-minded, but then at the same time being willing to possibly explain yourself on why you're removing yourself from the situation, or just reminding others like, hey, maybe that's not how we should be looking at this. Maybe we could look at it from a different angle.
So, I definitely like piggybacking off of what like David said earlier as well with turning the other cheek and what was said about not judging. I definitely think that you have to find, in order to point out and bring attention to the wrong and that being able to make change through that, you have to find where the brokenness is and where the dispute is, where the disturbance is. So I think a big way that I do that is by trying to live my life and represent myself in a way that is not like that's approachable, and I don't push my beliefs onto anybody else. I won't have conversations that they don't want to have. I won't like I just want to like show them what my God is like by how I act. And I don't have to necessarily like preach about it and scare people away who don't want to hear about Christianity by doing so. So I think being very welcoming to everybody, and that comes with not pushing your beliefs onto anybody else and being open-minded to hearing their beliefs, because there are valid points from every different religion and perspective that we have. So I think being welcoming is a big piece of how you can do that as well.
Yeah, I just had a conversation with my spiritual director yesterday about almost this exact thing. And one of the things she pointed out is that often under anger or frustration is something else. And usually that something else is some kind of a hurt. And so if we're able to hold a compassionate space for another person, and instead of asking what's wrong with you, we might ask, where does it hurt? Where are you hurting, and how can I come alongside you and in that healing process? That can be really tough to do, but I think that's what all of us are called to do when we encounter somebody who is just really, I'm talking like way on the extreme of like really angry and that kind of thing. I think sometimes we just have to be the one who says, how can I help you to heal?
That I read, if you don't heal from the people who hurt you, then you will bleed on people who didn't cut you. And I agree with that in so many ways too. And also about keeping peace between people. I feel like empathy has a lot to do with it. Because if you're able to understand why people are hurting, then you're just able to see things from their perspective. Like for me, what helps me, I actually have a little sticker on my iPad that says you, and it's just to remind me that not everyone, we're all raised differently. We all have reasons why we do the things that we do. And it is not our job to judge people or criticize people. And about being the same, we all descended from Abraham. God created the world in 6 days. So I mean, I hope that's the same God.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna go ahead and move on to some of the music that Michael picked for us, and she's gonna talk about that a little bit, and then she has a song for us.
So as I was looking for songs for this service, it was a little bit different because it's not me picking my contemporary Christian music that the band typically plays. And so there is this song that uses a phrase, Assalamu alaikum. And that is a greeting in Arabic that means peace be upon you. So I thought that was a really cool thing. It's got some English in there too, but they do use that phrase throughout the song as well. So I hope that you guys can bear that in mind as you listen to this piece.
Hoya, salam alaikum. Hoya, salam alaikum. Hoya, 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 hoya. Salam alaikum. Hoya, salam alaikum. Hoya, salam alaikum. Hoya, 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 hoya. Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum le. May peace be in your hearts. May peace be in your homes. May peace be in your land. May peace be in our world. Salam alaikum. Hoya. Salam alaikum. Hoya. Salam alaikum.
Andrew, we're having some trouble hearing.
Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum le. May peace be in your hearts. May peace be in your homes. May peace be in your land. May peace be in our world. Salam alaikum. Hoya. Salam alaikum. Hoya. Salam alaikum. Hoya. 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 Salam alaikum. Hoya. Salam alaikum. Hoya. Salam alaikum.
I'm hearing, someone just told me that you can hear it on the YouTube stream, so we might just be having some issues over
Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum le. May peace be in your land. May peace be in our world. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum le. May peace be in your hearts. May peace be in your homes. May peace be in your land. May peace be in our world. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum le. Salam alaikum le. May peace be in your hearts. May peace be in your homes. May peace be in your land. May peace be in our world. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum.
Alrighty, thank you, Michael, for finding that song and sharing it for us. I'm going to go ahead and get into our next readings. Some of the questions I'll have you think about while I do those readings is, how should we define nonviolence? How are we as human beings violent to ourselves? And in what areas of life can we be more nonviolent? So first, from the Hebrew Bible, we have, as King David was approaching Barim, a member of Saul's clan, a man named Shimei, son of Jerah, came out from there, hurling insults as he came. He threw stones at David and all King David's quarters, while all their troops and all their warriors were at his right and left. And these are the insults that Shimei hurled. Get out, you criminal, you villain. The Lord is paying you back for all your crimes against the family of Saul, whose throne you seized. The Lord is handing over the throne to your son Absalom. You are in trouble because you are a criminal. Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said to the king, Why let that dead dog abuse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut off his head." But the king said, "What has this to do with you, you son of Zeruiah? He is abusing me only because the Lord told me to abuse David. And who is to say, why did you do that?" David said further to Abishai and all the courtiers, "If my son, my own issue, seeks to kill me, how much more Benjamite? Let him go on hurling abuse, for then Lord has told him to. Perhaps the Lord will look upon my punishment and recompense me for the abuse that has been uttered to me today." The New Testament. "Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but take thoughts for what is noble in sight of all. If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, you live peacefully with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay,' says the Lord. No, if your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they are thirsty, give them something to drink. For by doing this, you will heap burning coals on their head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." And lastly, from the Quran, "Who speaks better than someone who calls people to God, does what is right, and says, 'I am one of those devoted to God.' Good and evil cannot be equal. Prophet, repel evil with what is better, and your enemy will become as close as an old and valued friend. But only those who are steadfast in patience, only those who are blessed with great righteousness, will attend to such goodness. If a prompting from Satan should stir you, seek refuge with God. He is the all-hearing and the all-knowing." All right, so to start off, any comments on the reading or on our first question on how we should define nonviolence?
It's interesting to me that all three of the readings in some way seem to leave it up to God. When it comes to sort of revenge or vengeance or justice, that ultimately people of at least these three Abrahamic faiths have a common belief of leave it to God, and God will do justice as necessary.
Adrian, I just saw you jump in. I did some readings on nonviolence, and now we're talking about how we should define nonviolence.
Okay, thank you.
If anyone doesn't have anything else, though, I can go ahead and move on. Michael, do you have something?
Kind of going with leaving it up to God. And we were, in Christianity, we believe that we were made in the image of God, in the image of Jesus. He came down to be an example of what we should be to everybody else. And in his life, he treated people with such overwhelming, all those fruits of the spirits: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. He showed those through how he lived. And I think a big piece of nonviolence is, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with peace, is if somebody is violent towards you, you just smother them with all the good and all the fruits of the spirit, and are good to them. And I liked the end of the reading from the Bible, the Christian Bible, that I really liked how it talked about that. That caught my attention for sure.
The verse that you read from the Quran was chapter 41, and it speaks of just like what's in the Bible. I mean, the Bible, just like Reverend McDonald was saying, to turn your other cheek. But in the Quran it says, if someone does good and evil, it's just hard to translate, so give me a second. Good and evil don't repel each other. So if someone does you wrong and then you do them good, there's no room for them to do you wrong. And a lot of people will hear in Islam, like, an eye for an eye. And if an eye for an eye, then that's just like an ever-ending cycle. Like, an eye for an eye, the whole world will go blind. So I completely agree. Non-violence would be for sure doing good to those who do you wrong. That for sure would bring a lot of peace.
All right, I guess that moves us into our next question of how are we as human beings violent to ourselves? So I think we always think of violence being against others, but we do a lot to ourselves. We can beat ourselves up a lot, and we can be our own worst critic.
A lot of it comes from self-discipline, I think. Being hard on yourself, that comes a lot from self-discipline. Like for me, I'm very hard on myself, and I know it's not good, but I feel like if I weren't so hard on myself, then I would just go like, so that's just my theory.
So I guess it can encourage us to be kind of tough on ourselves. But what are some ways that, like, if we're just having a hard week, like, what are some ways that we can maybe think of that even if you personally need to work on, or maybe like if you've noticed a friend that's really hard on themselves, and what's that advice that you want to give them to tell them to be less hard on themselves? So some things that we can do there.
I definitely think that anything that's like hard on ourselves stems from what we see around us. It stems from our own expectation of ourselves, which can come directly from other people or from what we see. And then we say, oh, I need to be like that. And then we hold ourselves to that standard. So I honestly think it's an injustice to just take all of that on to yourself and to not protect yourself from those kinds of things, in a sense. So I definitely think that if I were to tell a friend who was struggling with this, I would just say to just kind of like block everything else out, like find out what you want, what you believe your goals should be personally, just you, and don't expect to meet any sort of goals in a certain time period. Just work as hard as you can, as hard as you want to, as hard as is healthy for you, and just let everything else be. Don't, like, if you're working just as hard as somebody else and they're getting things done faster than you, like, you can't compare and you can't hold yourself to their standards either. So I definitely think just taking yourself outside of those influences and finding out what you need to do and doing it in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Like I would ask my friend the question of, would you speak to other people the way you speak to yourself?
Definitely. I think that a big part of that is doing things for ourselves and not doing them to please other people.
Yeah, something that came to my mind as both Arzi and Michael were talking was the phrase, you are not as important as you sometimes think you are, and you are also not as worthless as you sometimes think you are. You know, that sometimes we think that everything hinges on us, and then there are other times when we think there's nothing we can do. And yet the reality is that it's somewhere in the middle, that there's a lot that we can do. And that we can have an impact, but sometimes we're really hard on ourselves, and sometimes we're just, you know, we just really are down on who we are. So
I was having a conversation sort of about this with a colleague, and you know, we were just talking about being really critical and hard on ourselves, and as well as maybe sometimes that spills over into you kind of hold other people to high standards and are hard on others as well. But one of the things that I countered with, and this is something that I'm trying to challenge myself to do, is actually looking or trying to get the perspective of God on you. Because sometimes we try to be harder on ourselves, I think, than our Creator would be. Kind of like what Michael was saying, that we compare ourselves to others and we're trying to fit another mold, and we're not trusting in a way that we were created the way we were created for a purpose. And so we need to kind of tap into that purpose. We need to accept that the things about us that even we don't like were on purpose and for a purpose. And so we need to kind of work on accepting those. And instead of swimming upstream, I guess, go with the flow. So, and that's difficult to do, I know.
Definitely. All right, moving on to our next question, our last one. So we talked about how we're violent to ourselves. Now, in what areas of life can we be more nonviolent as a whole? So think what, even if I'm not saying that we're all violent, aggressive people, but I think that we all have our own tics and our own things that rub us the wrong way. So, for example, it could be something as little as driving. Do you get easily frustrated or aggressive when you're driving and someone's going 5 below the speed limit and you have to get to work? What are some ways that we can be just a little bit more nonviolent and more peaceful in life?
I always think of it in terms of control. If someone is capable of making you mad and making you angry, then they have total control over you. And I wouldn't want to give anyone that power over me. So that always helps me. Just take a deep breath and think that whoever is making me mad doesn't really matter. They're not that important if they're going to be rude or mean.
Piggybacking off of what you said, Arzi, I think that letting go is one of the biggest things that you can do. And I'm like sitting here, I'm dealing with a situation that came up yesterday, and I'm sitting here thinking about it, and I'm like, gosh, like, do I want these people to have power over me and to be able to make me feel this way? Like, what action is the best to take towards nonviolence? Is it good to just let it go, or is it good to share what happened and teach off of it? Like, it's very situational as well, but like I think letting go overall is a very good thing that you can do, unless it's like detrimental to anybody, unless it is violent towards you or anybody else and you need to intervene and mediate. Then I think letting go is a very big thing.
I'm reading this devotional book right now, and it's called Making God Smile, Living the Fruit of the Spirit One Day at a Time. And right now, the lessons are on gentleness. And today's lesson was just about trying to find all the ways that you can approach things with gentleness, because it makes a difference, and looking for people that are in need of gentleness in their day. And so I guess maybe it starts with being gentle with ourselves, but then also then looking for ways to be gentle as you interact with other people. I think being intentional about that kind of is as a counter to violence, right? Or to aggression, or to being harsh. So that's one of the things that I'm hoping helps me some.
And coming from the Christian tradition as well, one of the things that Jesus talks about in the New Testament is, he says, "You've heard it said, you shall not kill. But I say to you, even if you respond to someone with anger, it's at the same level as murder." And what he means there is that it begins with our heart, that we don't necessarily go around murdering people, but we do make people into non-persons all the time by blocking them out, by just discounting them, saying, oh, well, that person's crazy, or just, getting angry with them, whatever. And I think for me, nonviolence means recognizing that that person is a human being, even if I completely disagree with them, or even if I don't want anything to do with them, I still have to acknowledge that they're a human being made in the image of God, and to treat them as such. So
That reminds me of another quote: holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get hurt. Like, when it comes to anger, like, I lost a brother to homicide very brutally. And when I think of the person who killed him, if I don't forgive him, that's on me. That's heavy on my soul. So when I was able to forgive that person, I was able to visit the cemetery in peace. So I feel like forgiveness is a big part of that as well.
Definitely. I think we've all made some really great points. So, unfortunately, we are running out of time. So I think that that was our last question. I think that we're gonna go ahead and wrap things up. I really appreciate all of you coming today and sharing your inputs. It means a lot to us, and I hope that you guys enjoy this different kind of style of service today. And hopefully we can get some more people and get something else like this again soon. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Cameron, and thank you everybody for participating. We're so glad that you were able to join us, whether here on Zoom or on the YouTube channel for this conversation today. And thanks to folks who, read the questions ahead of time and prepared and came ready to ask questions. This has been a great conversation. We hope to have more of these going on. Some of them will be during chapel hour, some of them will be other times. But I want to thank again Cameron for her leadership in this and for just an excellent idea to do this in the first place. So as we say at the end of every chapel, and I think it's especially appropriate today, go in peace